very urgent. Your soulmate wants to warn you about something, please listen carefully. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because if these words found you today, let them simply be an invitation to pause for a moment. Not because fate is forcing your hand, but because sometimes the quietest moments are where the most meaningful reflections begin. Your heart needs this right now, not because someone else holds the answers to your future, but because you've been carrying questions that deserve honesty instead of fear. For days, something has felt different. Maybe you've noticed yourself thinking about someone unexpectedly. Maybe a memory surfaced for no obvious reason. Maybe you've been feeling the urge to slow down, even while life keeps asking you to move faster. Those moments don't have to mean that someone is secretly communicating with you. Sometimes they simply remind us to listen to ourselves more carefully than we usually do. Now imagine this as a story. Far away, someone who once crossed your path sat quietly by a window as rain tapped softly against the glass. They weren't searching for dramatic answers. They weren't looking for miracles. They were simply reflecting on the conversations they never had, the kindness they never expressed, and the moments they allowed fear to speak louder than honesty. As the evening grew darker, they realized something important. The greatest warnings in life rarely arrive with thunder. Most arrive as whispers. And whispers are easy to ignore. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. In this story, that person picked up an old notebook hidden inside a wooden drawer. Between faded pages were dreams written years ago. Goals that had once seemed impossible. Names of people who changed their life. Lessons learned through mistakes they wished they could undo. One sentence caught their attention. Protect your peace before you protect everyone's expectations. They stared at those words for several minutes. Not because they were new. Because they had forgotten them. Sometimes the most important advice isn't something we have never heard. It's something we stopped practicing. Outside, the rain slowly faded. Clouds drifted apart. Moonlight quietly settled across the room. Everything became still. In that silence, they imagined speaking to someone they deeply cared about. Not to control them. Not to predict their future. Simply to say one thing. Please don't ignore the small signs that your heart has been giving you. Don't scroll. Listen carefully. Because your heart needs this right now. There are moments when exhaustion disguises itself as commitment. When anxiety disguises itself as love. When constantly fixing everyone else's problems disguises itself as kindness. But none of those things create lasting peace. Peace grows where honesty lives. The person in our story understood this for the first time. They realized they had spent years trying to earn acceptance from people who never asked whether they were happy. They had become so busy carrying everyone else's expectations that they forgot to carry their own dreams. That realization felt uncomfortable. But it also felt freeing. The next morning arrived quietly. Golden sunlight spilled across the floor. Birds welcomed the day with cheerful songs. Children laughed while walking to school. Neighbors greeted one another with warm smiles. Everything outside looked ordinary. Yet inside, everything felt different. Because perspective had changed. Sometimes nothing around us needs to change before our life begins changing. Only the way we see it. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Your heart needs this right now. The person decided to visit a peaceful park where tall trees swayed gently in the breeze. Sitting on a weathered wooden bench, they watched families enjoying simple moments together. Nobody seemed to be rushing. Nobody appeared worried about tomorrow. Everyone was simply present. An elderly gardener nearby carefully trimmed flowers that had started to wilt. Curious, they asked, "Why remove flowers that are still beautiful?" The gardener smiled gently. "I'm not removing beauty. I'm making room for healthier growth." Those simple words lingered long after the conversation ended. Sometimes letting go isn't punishment. Sometimes it's preparation. As they continued walking, they noticed a small bridge crossing a calm stream. The flowing water never argued with the rock standing in its path. It simply found another way forward. That quiet image became another lesson. Strength doesn't always push harder. Sometimes strength chooses a wiser direction. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Your heart needs this right now. Later that afternoon, they stopped at a small cafe where soft music played in the background. People around them chatted about work, family, vacations, and ordinary life. Then they overheard an older couple sharing advice with their granddaughter. The grandfather smiled and said, "The people who truly care about you won't ask you to become smaller just to make them comfortable." His wife nodded. "And the people worth keeping will celebrate your growth, even when it changes the relationship." The young woman quietly smiled. So did the person listening nearby. Because those words answered questions they had carried for years. Not every warning tells you what to fear. Some warnings remind you what never to abandon. Your integrity. Your peace. Your kindness. Your self-respect. Those things deserve protection. As evening approached, the sky turned shades of orange, pink, and violet. The person returned home feeling lighter than they had in a long time. They opened the same notebook once more. This time they wrote a new message beneath the old one. "If I could warn someone I care about, I wouldn't tell them to fear the future. I'd remind them not to ignore themselves while chasing everyone else's approval. Because the greatest danger isn't making the wrong choice. It's forgetting that your own voice matters too." Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. If there is one message this story hopes you'll remember, it's this: pay attention to the quiet truths you already know. If a relationship constantly costs you your peace, reflect on why. If a dream continues returning to your heart, consider giving it attention. If rest feels necessary, don't mistake it for weakness. Sometimes the warning isn't about something outside of you. Sometimes it's about what you've been ignoring within yourself. The stars slowly appeared one by one across the evening sky. The notebook closed gently. Tomorrow remained unwritten. There would be more conversations. More decisions. More opportunities to choose courage over fear. And somewhere inside, the person smiled, knowing the most important warning had finally been understood. Not to live in fear of losing people, but to never lose themselves again. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because if you're still here, your heart needs this right now. The warning in this story was never meant to make you afraid of the future. It was meant to help you notice the quiet choices that shape your life long before big moments ever arrive. Sometimes the greatest turning points begin with one small realization that changes the way you see everything. The following morning, the person in our story woke before sunrise. The house was silent. The world outside still rested beneath soft shades of blue and gray. They made a warm cup of tea and stood beside the window watching the first light slowly spread across the sky. For the first time in months, they weren't thinking about what everyone expected from them. They were thinking about what they truly needed. That single shift felt unfamiliar. But it also felt peaceful. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. While organizing old papers, they discovered a faded photograph tucked inside one of the notebook's pages. It showed a group of smiling friends from years ago. Looking at the picture, they realized that only a few of those people were still part of their life. Some relationships had naturally drifted apart. Others ended because people grew in different directions. For years they believed those endings meant failure. Now they understood something different. Not every ending is a mistake. Sometimes growth quietly changes the roads people walk. And that's okay. They gently placed the photograph back inside the notebook and whispered, "I don't need to resent the past to appreciate what it taught me." Those words brought unexpected peace. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Your heart needs this right now. Later that day they visited a quiet bookstore, hoping to find something inspiring to read. As they wandered between shelves, they noticed an elderly man carefully returning books to their proper places. Curious, they asked, "How do you always know where everything belongs?" The man smiled warmly. "I don't rush. I read the labels carefully. Things are easier to understand when we slow down enough to really see them." Those simple words lingered in their mind. How often had they rushed through conversations? Rushed through decisions? Rushed through relationships? Without truly seeing what was in front of them? Perhaps life wasn't asking them to move faster. Perhaps it was asking them to become more present. Don't scroll. Listen carefully. Because your heart needs this right now. That afternoon they walked through a peaceful garden filled with blooming roses, lavender, and sunflowers dancing gently in the breeze. Every flower seemed to grow at its own pace. No rose hurried to become a sunflower. No sunflower tried to bloom like a lily. Each one became beautiful simply by becoming what it was created to be. Watching them brought another realization. Comparison steals joy. Growth begins the moment comparison ends. The warning they had been carrying wasn't about another person. It was about forgetting their own path while constantly watching someone else's. As evening approached, clouds gathered overhead and a light rain began to fall. Instead of running home, they found shelter beneath a large oak tree. Nearby, a father and his young daughter laughed together as they shared a small umbrella. The little girl asked, "Dad, why does it rain if sunshine is nicer?" He smiled. "So the trees can keep growing." She nodded thoughtfully. "Then maybe rainy days aren't bad." Those innocent words touched something deep inside. How many difficult seasons had secretly helped them become stronger? How many disappointments had quietly redirected them towards something healthier? Perhaps every painful chapter had also carried a hidden lesson. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. That night they returned home and opened their notebook again. This time they wrote. The warning wasn't about danger. It was about distraction. I became so focused on pleasing everyone else that I stopped listening to myself. I won't make that mistake again. They closed their eyes for a moment and reflected on the countless times they ignored their intuition because they feared disappointing someone. Every time they knew something wasn't right. Every time they stayed silent instead of speaking honestly. Every time they settled for less peace than they deserved. Their inner voice had been trying to protect them. It had never stopped speaking. They had simply stopped listening. Don't scroll. Listen carefully. Because your heart needs this right now. The following afternoon they returned to the same park where everything had first begun to change. The familiar bench overlooked a peaceful lake reflecting the afternoon sky like polished glass. An elderly woman sat nearby feeding birds. After a while she smiled kindly and said, "People spend so much time looking for signs. They forget they already carry wisdom inside them." The person looked surprised. The woman continued, "Sometimes confirmation doesn't arrive to tell you what to do. It arrives to remind you that you already know." Those words stayed with them long after the conversation ended. Perhaps courage wasn't finding new answers. Perhaps courage was finally trusting the answers already living inside. As sunset painted the sky with warm shades of gold and crimson, they stood beside the quiet water and watched gentle ripples spread across the lake. One small pebble created circles that reached far beyond where it first landed. Life worked the same way. Small choices created lasting consequences. Choosing honesty instead of pretending. Choosing rest instead of constant exhaustion. Choosing kindness without abandoning self-respect. Choosing peace instead of endless conflict. Those quiet decisions slowly shaped an entirely different future. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. Before going to bed, they opened the notebook one final time. On a fresh page they carefully wrote, "If I could warn someone I truly cared about, I wouldn't tell them to fear tomorrow. I'd remind them to protect today's peace. I'd remind them that ignoring their own heart is far more dangerous than disappointing people who were never meant to decide their future. I'd remind them that real love never asks someone to abandon themselves." The room became quiet. Outside, stars slowly filled the night sky. The warning had become clearer than ever. It wasn't asking anyone to panic. It was inviting them to wake up. Because the life waiting ahead belongs to the person who chooses truth over fear, peace over pressure, and authenticity over approval. And somewhere deep inside, they finally understood that the greatest protection wasn't knowing exactly what tomorrow would bring. It was becoming the kind of person who could meet tomorrow with wisdom, courage, and an honest heart. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because if you're still here, your heart needs this right now. The warning has never been about creating fear or convincing you that something mysterious is controlling your future. It has always been about learning to recognize the quiet moments that shape your character, your choices, and the direction your life takes. Sometimes the greatest warnings don't come as loud alarms. They arrive as gentle reminders to pay attention before small compromises become lifelong regrets. The next morning, the person in our story woke feeling lighter than they had in a long time. The same sunrise painted the sky with warm shades of orange and gold, yet everything looked different. Not because the world had changed overnight, but because they had begun seeing it through clearer eyes. They realized that peace isn't something you stumble upon one day. It is something you build through hundreds of honest decisions that no one else may ever notice. They stepped outside for an early walk through a nearby nature trail. Dew rested gently on the grass, birds welcomed the morning with cheerful songs, and a cool breeze carried the scent of pine trees through the quiet air. Every step reminded them that nature never rushes, yet everything unfolds exactly when it should. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. Along the path they noticed a young gardener carefully removing weeds from around a beautiful flower bed. Curious, they stopped to watch for a moment. The gardener smiled and said, "Most people admire the flowers. But very few notice how much time is spent removing what quietly steals their growth." Those words stayed with them. Life wasn't only about planting dreams. It was also about removing habits that slowly stole peace. Negative thoughts. Constant comparison. Fear of disappointing others. Holding on to guilt that no longer served any purpose. The warning suddenly became even clearer. Sometimes what holds us back isn't what we're missing. It's what we've refused to let go of. Don't scroll. Listen carefully. Because your heart needs this right now. Later that afternoon they visited a quiet cafe overlooking a small river. As they sat near the window with a warm cup of tea, they watched the gentle current carry fallen leaves downstream. None of the leaves fought against the water. None tried to return to the branch they once belonged to. They simply allowed the current to carry them forward. Watching that peaceful scene brought another realization. Some chapters end naturally. Holding on to them only creates unnecessary suffering. Growth often requires releasing what no longer belongs in your life with gratitude instead of resentment. As they reflected quietly, an elderly woman sitting nearby noticed the thoughtful expression on their face. She smiled kindly. Sometimes people think moving forward means forgetting. It doesn't. It means carrying the lessons without carrying the weight. Those simple words settled deeply into their heart. They had spent so much energy trying to erase painful memories. Perhaps healing wasn't forgetting. Perhaps healing was remembering without allowing the past to control the present. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. That evening they returned home and opened the notebook once again. Across a fresh page they slowly wrote. The warning wasn't telling me to fear mistakes. It was reminding me not to repeat the same ones simply because they feel familiar. They paused for several moments before continuing. Comfort isn't always peace. Familiar isn't always healthy. Choosing differently isn't betrayal. Reading those words aloud filled the quiet room with unexpected calm. Outside the window, gentle rain began falling once again. Instead of feeling lonely, the sound brought comfort. Rain had watered every season of growth in their life. Without difficult moments, they would never have discovered their own strength. Don't scroll. Listen carefully. Because your heart needs this right now. The following day they volunteered at a local community garden where neighbors gathered every weekend to care for vegetables, flowers, and fruit trees together. While planting new seeds beside an older volunteer, they asked, "How do you know which seeds will grow?" The older gardener smiled. "You don't. But if you keep planting good seeds consistently, something beautiful almost always grows." That answer felt larger than gardening. Every kind word. Every honest conversation. Every patient decision. Every act of forgiveness was another seed. Not every seed grows immediately. But kindness planted consistently always changes something. Sometimes it changes the world. Sometimes it simply changes us. And sometimes, that's exactly where change begins. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. As sunset approached, they walked once more beside the peaceful lake where their journey had first begun. Children laughed while feeding ducks. Couples walked hand in hand along the shoreline. An elderly man quietly painted the colorful sky reflected across the water. Everything felt beautifully ordinary. Yet something extraordinary had happened inside. Fear no longer controlled every decision. Approval no longer determined every choice. They finally understood that protecting inner peace sometimes means disappointing expectations that were never yours to carry. The warning had transformed into wisdom. Not because life suddenly became easy, but because they had become stronger. Before leaving the park, they noticed a small wooden sign near the walking trail. It read, "Walk gently. Every step shapes the path behind you." They smiled. Every choice leaves a trail. Not only for ourselves, but for the people whose lives we touch. Choosing honesty encourages honesty. Choosing kindness inspires kindness. Choosing courage quietly gives others permission to become courageous too. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. That night they wrote one final reflection before closing the notebook. The greatest warning I ever received wasn't about losing someone else. It was about losing myself while trying to become everything everyone expected. From this day forward, I choose something different. I choose peace without guilt, kindness without self-abandonment, love without fear, and honesty without apology. As they gently closed the notebook, the room became still. Outside, thousands of stars stretched across the clear night sky. Tomorrow remained unknown. But for the first time in many seasons, that uncertainty no longer felt frightening. Because they had learned the most important lesson of all. No warning can prevent every challenge life may bring. But wisdom, compassion, integrity, and courage can help us face every challenge with confidence. And sometimes, that is the greatest protection anyone could ever receive. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because if you've stayed with this story until now, your heart needs this right now. The final message isn't about predicting your future or telling you exactly what tomorrow will bring. It's about recognizing that the greatest transformation always begins within. Every lesson you've witnessed throughout this journey has been quietly preparing you for one simple but powerful truth: peace is not something another person gives you, it is something you choose to build every single day. The morning arrived gently, wrapped in golden sunlight that filtered through the curtains. Everything outside looked ordinary. Birds sang from nearby trees. The breeze carried the scent of fresh rain from the night before. Cars passed in the distance. Life continued exactly as it always had. Yet something was undeniably different. The person in our story no longer woke up wondering what everyone else expected from them. Instead, they asked a new question. How can I live today with honesty, kindness, and peace? That one question changed everything. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. They returned one final time to the quiet lake where this journey had begun. The water reflected the clear blue sky like polished glass. Families laughed nearby. Friends shared conversations on wooden benches. Children chased butterflies through the grass. Watching those simple moments reminded them that happiness rarely arrives through extraordinary events. It often hides inside ordinary days. A peaceful conversation. A warm smile. A quiet walk. A thankful heart. The greatest miracles are sometimes the smallest moments we almost overlook. As they sat quietly, an elderly man approached carrying a sketchbook filled with beautiful landscape drawings. He smiled warmly and asked, "Do you know what every painting teaches me?" Curious, they shook their head. The man replied, "You can never paint tomorrow's sunrise today. You simply prepare your canvas and welcome it when it arrives." Those words settled deeply into their heart. Life works the same way. We cannot control every future event. But we can prepare ourselves to meet it with wisdom, patience, and courage. Don't scroll. Listen carefully. Because your heart needs this right now. They opened the notebook one final time. Instead of writing fears, they began writing gratitude. Thank you for every challenge that taught me resilience. Thank you for every disappointment that redirected me towards something healthier. Thank you for every season of waiting that taught me patience. Thank you for every mistake that became a lesson instead of a life sentence. With every sentence, their heart felt lighter. Not because the past disappeared, but because they had finally stopped carrying it as a burden. Instead, they carried it as wisdom. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. As afternoon arrived, they visited a community center where neighbors gathered to help prepare meals for families in need. No one asked about careers. No one cared about appearances. Everyone simply worked together. Someone chopped vegetables. Someone baked bread. Someone washed dishes. Someone greeted every visitor with genuine kindness. Watching everyone serve one another revealed another beautiful truth. Purpose often grows strongest when we stop focusing only on ourselves. Helping others doesn't erase our own struggles, but it reminds us that kindness always has room to grow. Even on difficult days. A young child helping beside them smiled and handed over a fresh loaf of bread. I hope this makes someone smile today. Such simple words, yet filled with extraordinary wisdom. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. That evening they walked through a quiet neighborhood as lights slowly appeared in windows across the street. Every home carried its own unseen story. Some families were celebrating. Some were grieving. Some were healing. Some were beginning entirely new chapters. From the outside, no one could fully know another person's journey. That realization filled them with compassion. People often carry invisible battles. Kindness matters because we rarely know what someone else is overcoming. A gentle word. A patient response. A sincere apology. A thoughtful act of encouragement. These small choices can change someone's entire day. Sometimes, their entire life. Don't scroll. Listen carefully. Because your heart needs this right now. Later that night they climbed a nearby hill where the stars stretched endlessly across the sky. The world felt wonderfully quiet. No notifications. No expectations. Only stillness. Looking upward, they realized how much energy they had once spent trying to control things that were never theirs to control. Other people's opinions. Perfect timing. Every possible outcome. Now they understood something much greater. Peace begins when control ends and trust begins. Not blind trust, but trust in your own values. Trust that honesty matters. Trust that kindness matters. Trust that integrity matters. Even when results take time. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. They wrote one final page inside the notebook. If someone is meant to walk beside me, kindness will strengthen the journey. If someone walks away, I will still choose kindness. If life becomes uncertain, I will still choose hope. If fear returns, I will remember everything I've already survived. I no longer need to become someone else to deserve love, peace, or belonging. I simply need to become more fully myself. As they closed the notebook for the very last time, something beautiful happened. Nothing dramatic. No flashing signs. No mysterious voice. Only a quiet smile. Sometimes that is exactly how healing feels. Not explosive. Just peaceful. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. The warning that began this journey was never meant to create fear. It was meant to encourage awareness. To remind you not to ignore your own well-being. Not to lose yourself while trying to please everyone else. Not to mistake anxiety for love. Not to confuse constant struggle with destiny. Instead, choose relationships built on respect. Choose conversations built on honesty. Choose decisions guided by wisdom instead of panic. Choose hope instead of fear. Choose compassion without forgetting yourself. And above all, choose the version of yourself that lives with integrity every single day. That choice becomes the foundation for everything that follows. The future will always contain unknowns. But you do not need every answer before taking the next good step. Sometimes the greatest courage is simply continuing forward with an open heart. And that is where this story truly ends. Not with a prediction. Not with certainty about tomorrow. But with something even more valuable. The quiet confidence that whatever tomorrow brings, you can meet it with wisdom, kindness, gratitude, and hope. Because your heart needed this reminder today. And perhaps that is the most meaningful message of all.